This episode was made possible by my generous supporters on Patreon. Welcome to my new patron this month, Steamed Ham Champion Dylan Haggett. For some reason, this name brings such a smile to my face. I don't know, I love it.
It's a very good one.
All right.
It seems today that Border now is flying into space. The question is how?
But where are those good old-fashioned agents
on which we used to rely? Lucky there's a Kuma guy. Lucky there's a lass who's from the squad of NASA's. She's the one that co-made explode and die. She's a Kuma guy.
I played rugby in college.
And now for something completely different.
Trigger on!
Welcome, D-Roll, to the Duckface Diaries. We are a World Trigger read-through podcast aiming to discuss the World Trigger manga volume by volume. I'm Wensleydale Cheddar.
And I'm Hovin with an H, and this episode will be tackling volume 23, which covers chapters 197 to 205.
That's right, and how are you doing?
Not bad. I've started playing Luigi's Mansion, the third one on the Switch, which, I swear to God, Nintendo fucked up. They should have... So they called this Luigi's Mansion 3, when the whole premise of the game is that you are trying to find ghosts in a haunted hotel called the Last Resort Hotel. So why on God's green earth was this game not called Luigi's Last Resort? Like, I understand there's like a branding consistency thing, but it's such a good title. It's right there. It sounds attention-grabbing, and it fits the game better.
I have actually given up trying to understand video game naming conventions. I've been watching no commentary playthroughs of Mario games, starting from the early ones as I was editing the last few podcasts. I don't understand why some of them are called Bros, why some of them are called Land. I don't understand why World isn't even tied to any particular specific console. What? Why?
When World came out, I think it was the first time that you had an interactive, overworld map that was cohesive and you could move between them, but they didn't use that convention for that following. It's never consistent with that after that. And then Land, I think in the first game you were visiting a different kingdom to the usual Mushroom Kingdom. You're visiting Sarasaland, I think. So...
Oh yeah, but back to save this crazy Princess Daisy, right?
Yes. In both cases, it's the first instance that it's done, it makes sense. But then after that, it's very arbitrary and doesn't necessarily correlate with what the game is doing.
Right, yeah, I getcha. I didn't even remember that I think I used to own Land, the original one on the Game Boy Color.
I got started with Mario on the DS ones. I'm a wee babby. I had a Game Boy, but I didn't play any of the Mario games on that. And I have gone back and played the first Mario, the original Super Mario Bros. Not Mario Bros, which is the real first Mario, but it has completely different gameplay.
Each time I talk to you about Nintendo stuff, I feel so old because you always say oh yeah, the Game Boy Advance sounds are so nostalgic. They bring a warm feeling to my heart. And I was I mean, I was a teenager by that point. I didn't really. It's the chiptune sounds that are nostalgic for me, even though some of them are a bit before my day.
I mean, to be fair, the original Game Boy has quite a wide window, but Game Boy to Color to GBA, there was quite a fast turnaround on them. They weren't that far apart. So it's not that big of a generational gap, but that of course depends where you jumped in with Game Boy. Because the Game Boy was around since 89.
I know that you said wide window, but I thought you meant a wide Rindo, which is very topical for this podcast, but because the Rindo family is very prominent in this one, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, let's get to the volume proper. So first we are going to do a bit of a summary for volume 23 of World Trigger. Story and art done, as always, by Daisuke Ashihara, translated by Caleb Cook, touch-up and lettering done by A. Score Chrisman, designed by Julian Robinson, and edited by Ray First. Then we're going to move on to our general thoughts. That's really it, but because we don't have a Q&A, we don't have anything else, so it's potentially going to be the most concise episode of Duckface Diaries yet. But we're going to use this space to talk a little bit about the future of Duckface Diaries as a whole, because we've just hit a big milestone, not in subscriber count, not on Patreon, let's not kid ourselves, in the recap itself, and this is going to be the last podcast of the year, as I was hoping to do Podcast Mon Adventures next month, but we might have to take a month off, and we're going to talk about what will happen after that.
All right, sounds good. Shall we move on to the summary?
No.
All right, well, stay here. I'll talk about Mario some more.
Okay, now let's do it. So, last we left off, we were building up the tail end of the final match of the season. Nasa Squad squaring off against Katori and Suwa. Everyone in the audience pops to the next room to see what's happening there, and even Chica wants to watch it from the Tamakoma strategy room. With the new arrivals, the commentary team, led by Ayatsuji of Arashiyama Squad, decides to recap the match. Suwa is leading with 2 points, as each squad has only 2 agents left. Despite the poor warping positions, Nasa Squad has a plan B, as Akane snipes at Suwa Squad between the buildings. When forced to hide in hidden alleyways, they are trapped in the perfect condition for Nasa's bullets. Seemingly more complacent than usual, Katori asks for Wakamura's command what to do. We flash back to the fallout of the previous round as Rokuro betrays Yoko for her hastiness as usual, so she decides to give him what she wants. She will listen to his orders. This time, he's the captain. Suwa is bewildered by Katori's passivity, as she doesn't take the lead in the charge on Nasu. Rokuro questions himself as he fails to consider the here and now, counting points left to lead the upper group. He guesses right on Nasu's Viper barrage being a concentrated shot, but he fails to notice a meteor trap behind them. One of the bullets slips through and detonates a landmine, blowing Rokuro up. Katori is annoyed as the frozen blonde refuses to give her his commands. Hana interjects, saying Yoko should stick to his strat to the very end, and at least use the trigger he told her to equip. Katori grumbles, but summons a bunch of spider cubes. As Suwa and Daichi hone in to take out Katori, the ace all-rounder takes them by surprise. She drops down, launching a flurry of spider cubes for an instant web, and then maneuvers between them to land opposite, summons some more under the feet, grabs the trapped Suwa's rifles, and knee stabs him. Shorthead Brock manages to only take Katori's leg before she escapes with ease. Yet, Tsutsumi is determined to take at least one more point. Katori closes the distance with Nasu, dodging one Viper volley before the boomerang right into her shield. Nasu thinks she can easily send another array of bullets up close, but when she wasn't looking, Katori tied her legs to the ground with Spider. Katori slashes open Ray, though as she explodes, Tsutsumi aims his rifle at Yoko. She evades with a grasshopper, but guess what? Tsutsumi had 2 guns. The close-eyed gunner emerges victorious from the clash of 2 captains by some bloody miracle. A wild Akane appears. The last remaining member of Nasu's squad attacks Daichi with Ibis. Noticing he's surrounded by Nasu's mines, he chooses to turtle up under a shield, with an additional shield protecting his chest. But Akane wasn't aiming for the tiddy. As she eviscerates his stomach, Tsutsumi bails out, leaving the sniper with a stupid sniper hat as the sole survivor of the battlefield. The survival points grant the team entry into the upper B rank tier for the very first time. The commentary team sings Akane's praises as Suwa Squad consoles Daichi and highlights his accomplishments. Rokuro laments his performance, but Katori doesn't blow up like she used to and accepts that this is the way things are now. The directors conduct the risk assessment of allowing Akane her leave and decides she doesn't need to have her memory wiped, which is, good. So we cut to the former and current members of Yuba Squad having some comfy dinner. They bid farewell to Kanda as he plans on going to Kyushu to study architecture. As Kanda repeats Yuma's words that Obishima is going to get stronger, she starts to cry, the grief from the loss only hitting her now. The next day, Akane says her goodbyes to the other sniper girls and the rest of Nasa Squad. The newsboy Cap goofball will be missed by all. Although she will always remain part of the squad, she nominates Izuho to fill her spot. Though she protests that she's not even a B rank yet, Toma and Chika believe in her, and that's enough for the other girls. Back at Tamakoma base, Yuma and Osamu make the plans for the away mission test. However, Jin says, prior to that, he wants them to meet someone. So chapter 200, titled Ruka Shinoda, starts by Osama wondering, someone Jin wanted us to meet. I wonder, who could it be? Gee, I wonder who, Osama, fucking Aquaman!
I just like the implication that, like, he just didn't tell them. They were just like, so who was it? And he's just, like, T-posed and levitated out of the room with Bonchi snacks. And didn't tell them.
Yeah, he's like fucking no clips like the NPCs from fucking Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which, by the way, next podcast Mon Adventures is going to be pretty fun.
Yeah, no, that's been an interesting thing to be a spectator to.
HQ director Shinoda comes over with assistant director Sawamura and an unfamiliar girl, introduced as Ruka, Yotaro's sister. After Osama wonders about the last names, it turns out neither of them are biologically related to the border dads. They had been adopted because the biological parents were acquaintances that had died dealing with neighbor business. Apparently. Ruka displays a prideful attitude, says Border's development is in large part because of her and Yotaro's existence. Cronin pops in and wacky hijinks ensue. Yotaro wants to show Ruka a new move he's been working on and asks the Canadian Sakamoto from Sakamoto days to juggle him with his feet. But then he drops and cracks his skull open, the only time he's not wearing a helmet, mind you, much to Ruka's horror. It was only a Triumph body, but still. But she actually wanted to play with her brother herself. Jin drops in with a bin on his chin and subverts Osama's expectations. He actually wanted them to meet someone else rather than Ruka. So Osama is even more surprised by the talented elite's request to whip out his Triumph body incognito, but goes along with it. So we cut to the Gala-Poland away ship, where Ratarikov and Reginald prepare to head off to an undisclosed location.
We see the Gala-Polish subterfuge squad discuss their plans on board their ship a few days prior from where Rata proposes reconnaissance in plain sight. The reluctant Regi is selected to escort him to a civilian area of Mikado. While discussing their observations and the state of their mission, the pair are approached by Jin, bearing a peace offering of Bonchi snacks. Following instructions, Rinzo proposes that they quit their current mission. In exchange, Border would delay their current mission by 50 days, giving Gala-Poland some result to take back to Afto, a time frame that present-day Jin clarifies is not actually changing their schedule whatsoever. But they don't know that. Oink, oink. Rindo asks that they provide information on the other vassal states in case any are sent to invade them between then and the away mission, and emphasizes the risk of civilian casualties as a chief concern. Rata understands this, but adds that he can't make the decision without the captain's input. Rata asks where the Border obtained a mother trigger, deducing that this must be the source of their Trion. His squad detected a huge Trion signature underneath the hangar, which he suspects is this very power source. Rindo confirms this, clarifying that obtaining this trigger marked the point that Border started growing, but that a small team had been active on the down low for some time beforehand, referring to the original Border. He reveals the meaning of Border's emblem to the neighbors, the allied nations of Dexia, Mezan, and Aristera. Rata responds with surprised recognition to the last of these. Rindo explains that the Aristeran royal heirs escaped their nation's destruction in secret, with the mother trigger in tow, and sought refuge in Border, and the newborn baby prince was none other than Yotaro. Dun dun dun! It's also revealed that Ruka is the former princess that operates the mother trigger, but she has not become a god. Border's Trion output is dwarfed by that of other nations' mother triggers as a result. However, Earth doesn't need one. Rata instead deduces that Border possesses a crown trigger, something that present-day Jin explains serves the mother trigger to protect or aid the planet in some way. Yuma explains about his home nation's equivalent, a multitude of small beings called Tsuchigami, which specialize in construction, deconstruction, and repairs. And Border's crown trigger is revealed to be Raijin Maru. Past Jin explains to the Gala-Polish that in messing with Yotaro, they were an inch away from causing a capybara kaiju-related disaster. Before departing, Rata asks what the advantage of Gallo's defection would be at Border. It's at this point that Rindo and Jin inform them of the latter's side effect, and that his foresight tells him of good things for the vassal state if they team up. The Gala-Polish confer on the ship, and Gatlin, while doubtful, asks Ratirikov what he'd do. Back in the present, Jin introduces Osamu and Yuma to Rata and Reigi at a quiet spot by the river. Jin confirms his foresight ability to the former enemies by predicting the appearance of a hidden communication and homing trigger, 2 bracelets that can covertly monitor the other's location and contact each other while close enough. This functions both as potential aid for Border in the event of trouble, and also assurance for Gallipoli that Border's proposed delays, quote-unquote, are correct when the away mission ship arrives. Jin hands her bracelet to Osamu, stating that based on the intel Afto gave him, he'll have to stay behind to protect Border. Osamu has brief doubts about a potential intel leak, but Yuma insists that the Gallipols aren't lying with their propositions. When Yuma and Osamu are confirmed as Border's representatives, the meeting is adjourned. On their way back, Jin admits that Osamu's performance in the away mission test is still up in the air, but encourages him to give it all he can. Yuma then reveals one thing Ratarikov did in fact lie about. As we transition back to the Gallipol ship, where Gatlin concedes to Rata that while he commands the squad, the younger neighbor calls the shots at Gallipola as a whole, as he is none other than Orkan Marduk, a fugitive and the 4th Prince of Gallipoland! Dun dun dun! On a later day, Yuma shows off his bicycle skills, prompting remarks of confusion at such a vehicle's use from Hughes. When considering the prospects of Konami teasing him for being unable to ride it, however, he does try the vehicle himself, and immediately falls over. Konami calls them in with news of the away test schedule. This consists of orientation, captain's interviews, a lengthy Phase 1, followed by a shorter Phase 2. They also have a survey to fill out with the following questions: whether they wish to join the away mission or not, with or without their squad, pick up to 5 team members from the other squads that they prefer to work with, and which 2 agents they would prefer not to. With the third question, Yuma chooses based on who he gets on with, while Hughes chooses based on who is most challenging to face in battle. Chika struggles to think of 5, so Shiori assures her that nothing in the question states that they need the full set. After some consideration, Osamu chooses Ninomiya as his final pick for who he'd want on his team. On March 13th, orientation begins as Kido and Shinoda address all mid to higher B rank squads, as well as a few A rankers. He explains that the test is both to serve as general aptitude test for all agents, and that qualification would be a strong mark on any of their records, regardless of their choice to embark. It's also explained that some currently non-qualifying squads could still make the cut as a result of these tests. Shinoda outlines the following phases: 1 week in a sealed environment, simulate shipboard conditions, followed by a combat situation of up to 36 hours. He then introduces a curveball. All squads were to be shuffled into 11 5-member teams, each with a provisional captain. The announced captains are as follows: Utagawa, Oji, Kizaki, Kitazoe, Kuruma, Kodera, Suwa, Ninomiya, Mizukami, Murakami, and Wakamura. Each is assigned an operator, while Usami, Kitaka, and Itomi are assigned to help with the test behind the scenes. All other attending agents are split into 3 pools for the captains to pick from, going between the pools when one prior one is exhausted. The picking order for the draft is decided by lottery, and the captains cannot choose from their own squads. Ninomiya comes up first, with Wakamura dead last. The picking process begins with later picks like Hanzaki bemoaning their public humiliation. Wakamura seems more indecisive than the others, but manages to land Hughes in his search for a powerhouse agent. The lottery is retaken whenever they switch pools.
Hanzaki is so depressed. It's like, oh,
Yep.
we have never had this much focus on this character, and like he's so much fucking misery.
After Chika is selected, we really get some insight into what the lesser focused characters, how they feel. After Chika is selected for Ninomiya's team, Ama uses the sheer power of pleading facial expressions for Ninomiya to have him join her. The squads end up, well, at this point, I assume you've read the series. I'm not going to repeat what every squad is. They list off all the squads. You can read the chapters to know who the squads are. I'm not going to repeat them. This is already a very long recap for me.
Yeah, we're out of anime onlys anyway, so if you read this, you've probably read past that. Just a word of warning, there are going to be spoilers.
Yes, there are. It's when Shinoda opens the floor to questions that the long off-screen squad captain Wataru Urashima voices dissatisfaction with the reward for non-participants to the mission, suggesting they should raise his pay to that of an A rank, much to the chagrin of his operator, Riki Rokuta. In response to this, Kido offers a mission stipend of 10,000 yen per day, which passing non-participants will receive half of, which satisfies Urashima. Osamu asks if the other A rankers will be joining them. Shinoda responds that they will participate in the simulation phase, but for Phase 1, they'll be judging them. Judging you! And that's the end of the volume. General thoughts?
Let's do it.
Do you want to start, or shall I start?
I think you can start, but I will just say, Urashima, don't you mean Araragi from Monogatari?
Yes, he does look a lot like Gararagi. This was a very interesting one, since I feel like with this volume, I had the most vivid comparison to how I was reacting to these chapters as they came out versus now, because this was when I started keeping up with the series monthly again. It was really nice to get this one in, because we got a lot of little things to tie up the away mission tests. And it was also interesting, a lot of things such as the Katori squad stuff, which on a first read read to me as a wrap-up for their character, plays very differently. Originally I was like, okay, that's a bit of a weird place to end off their characters, and then now I've realized, no, this is just like moving them there to their next stage, so it feeling a little bit inconclusive is by design. I've got to say, the draft is the biggest trial by fire that this series has ever given its readers. And I won't lie, I tried to go into it with an open mind on a second read. I still can't fully support it. I understand the value of having the captains choose teammates at their own initiative, but seeing this process firsthand is really only interesting for Shinomiya and Rakabura. Ninomiya! Fuck! I did it again! I did it again! This was not a bit. This is a mistake. But yeah, I thought that the others they could have been skimmed past. Any interest towards this decision-making process has become apparent in the test itself since then, and though it may seem narratively cheap to not see a decision but later have the character justify it, I think some level of convenience and narrative cheapness is just necessary here for the sake of narrative flow. I feel like, in essence, it's always going to be a little intimidating to drop this information, and you do need to drop this information, but I think you could have done it better. I get that World Trigger is a series that doesn't compromise on its world building and needs to be met halfway, but that's just the thing. Met halfway. I'm actually of the opinion that the away mission test is shaping up to be a pretty decent arc, with a very apparent goal that isn't being appreciated by a large amount of readers. But creative decisions like this are so unwieldy and unnecessary to achieve that, and I can see why it's alienating to a lot of readers.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I want to address this point immediately. I'll build up to it, so let's put a pin in that. So I think this volume, and the away mission test shows me that in a series with good characterization, good approach to character in general, there doesn't have to be an endpoint to character building, which ties to kind of what you've said about Katori Squad there. We're at a point in World Trigger where, to some extent, I still kind of think that we've established everything that needs to be established about these characters. Not only about our major characters, but all the B-rank squads as well, at least it's major members. If we were meant to be thrown into a big tense war or mission with them, we'd care decently about them, perhaps less so if we were to go exploring unknown lands we don't have any emotional connection to. We've stayed at Mikado City for a while now, and I can't help but make the comparison between this and another prominent former Shonen Jump series that made a strong impression at the start in a very, very set location, finished that arc, started exploring other different lands, and then got less interesting as a result. I'm talking about The Promised Neverland. I think by the away mission test arc in general, that the series is trying to prevent itself from being that. Character building isn't about accomplishing the bare minimum, and I don't think there needs to be a cap on it. You can throw different sorts of personalities at each other and just enjoy the ride as you get to know more and more about them, as they kind of start becoming part of your life in the wacky hijinks they get up to. You and I and Asha, we've binge-watched The Office recently, right? This arc, warts and all, even the draft pick chapters kind of remind me of several episodes of that. These kinds of slice of life sitcoms are popular for a reason. We have a slice of life comedies in Jump as a whole, in Jump Plus even. I guess it's a question of setting expectations, isn't it? A series builds itself to be one thing and then becomes another thing later. We had that process in A World Trigger once between the Invasion and the Rank Wars arcs. I think World Trigger used to be a battle intrigue series, then it became a sports series. Now it's a sitcom or a mock reality show, and that's kind of okay. So as not to be uncritical, I do wish, this is something we talked about before, I do wish the manga were clearer about the stakes of the past two sagas. I can't have been the only one who thought getting second place in the rank wars itself guarantees you a spot on the away mission. I'm glad they added that tension, but you could have done a better job communicating that at the start of the rank wars, Ashihara. I do agree that the Ashihara didn't do a great job setting the reader's expectations for this. This development, on its own, I think is okay. So due to these expectations, I fear that people who are going to come back to the away mission completely checked out from the away mission test part are going to be like, why should I care about all this? And in a few simple communication writing tricks, you could have averted that. But now it's kind of too late for it. I kind of have to take it as it is and enjoy this part of the series as I go.
So I think you've highlighted the aforementioned goal of the away mission test that I alluded to very, very well. In terms of how I will reiterate, I am enjoying the away mission test arc. I've been enjoying it more and more as it's gone along. Part of that is kind of how I've experienced the arc, in that, at the start, we're shown all of these teams, and a lot of them are side characters who have not had very much focus, and I'm like, okay, I have no way of conceptualizing what these teams are like. And then as the arc has gone on, I have slowly acclimated to that. I have slowly, gotten a feel of what each of these characters are like. And I have to wonder if, and I'm very much hypothesizing here. Of course, I am not a storyteller on the level of Ashihara, but
Oh, you are. I think you're a great writer. So
oh, thank you. But maybe a more optimal way to introduce this arc could mirror that. At the start, you're shown what all the teams are, and maybe given some insight into the characters being like, I don't know these people very well. Maybe a start more from the perspective of characters that have had more insights, rather than giving everyone kind of an equal amount of weight as they do it, or near equal amount of weight in these chapters. But I guess that kind of leans into, again, the way that we've discussed Ashihara's all-or-nothing approach, where he doesn't remind people of the stakes constantly. He doesn't really have much of a mind towards streamlining things that way. It's a tricky one. I think regardless of how much you tweak it, introducing this many teams with this vast a cast of characters of very varying importance over the course of the series, especially when it's coming out monthly, it's going to alienate a lot of people regardless, and that's just something that can't be avoided. And I think overall, the narrative goal of the away mission test, what it's doing, is a net positive. I like what it's doing, and I think it's a net positive for the series, even if I have problems with it here and there.
Yeah, I quite agree. I thought, myself, on a second read-through, I agree with what you said, as it could have been handled differently and didn't have to waste a month on it. But to be honest, I'm it was only a month. I have different things to read. World Trigger, even if it's something I read very closely, is not the only thing in the world I am going to read. So it wasn't really a big deal for me when Ashihara spent some time on character interactions in a scene that's kind of very easy to set up, and it's very easy to for different characters to chime in. The draft pick scene, it's a scene that's very easy to write when you have a writing style that kind of lends itself to a cast of thousands. I know, because I'm very much the same way. Talking heads in a set, simple environment is very easy to draw. We also have to understand that Ashihara is someone who is chronically ill, and even so has a full-time job on this. I kind of give him some slack because of this, but also because I like different characters from The Office just throwing lines at each other. It's fun for me.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think whether a given creative decision with the away mission arc works for me or not, I think it often really roots around whether I'm seeing things from the perspective of the characters, which I think kind of ties into that hypothetical of how would I change this draft thing. Another example is when we're focusing on, because a lot of people don't, I don't know a lot of people, to be honest. I only talk to, I'll be upfront, I only really talk to my circles about manga, and people I've talked to really don't like a lot of the self-theorizing that has gone on in the series, and for me it's massively a case of, well, it depends which self-theorizing, because if you're talking about the provisional squads trying to work out what they're being tested on and trying to walk through, that's very engaging for me, because that you're seeing the people taking the test trying to gain insights into the test, which is itself part of the test. You're seeing them work through a challenge. When it's the executives commenting on them, I'm less into it because I'm like, okay, why couldn't this stuff be explained to the participants at the end? Wouldn't that be more narratively useful? I kind of had this a bit with the A rankers, but I'm now starting to revise my opinion on that because I think the A rankers are being tested here as well, and they are going to play into things with the second phase of the test. So maybe I could revise and say, actually, yeah, the A rankers judging is also significant because they will be involved in this mission too, and this mission is unprecedented in a lot of ways.
It depends a lot also on how funny you find those scenes, but because like the board administration stuff is very dry.
Yeah.
Whereas like the A rank shit posting, commenting on all the different characters interacting in this reality show, I don't know, it kind of tickles me.
Speaking of the border executives, the insights into how they run things in this volume, or I don't know if it's insight, if we learn anything particularly new with them, but like just kind of how it reinforces that. I like well, you mentioned the incredibly eerie scene where they decide, yeah, sure, Akane's a good sport. We won't brainwash her. We won't wipe her memory. And the fact that they outright say that, they just imply it. And then also, I love the emphasis on Border seeming to change their plans, but it being quite clear that behind the scenes, nothing's changed. It's just spin, with them quote-unquote delaying the mission when it's just them just giving the existing time frame and presenting it as a delay. The fact that the stipend is probably not something Kido is throwing out last minute. He's probably thought, yeah, okay, fine. If they nag, we'll give them this. We can afford it.
Oh yeah, Kido was kind of already planning to give this incentive to the agents, but I mean, if no one asks about it, then I mean, we can just leave it as
yeah, a little bit of an extra bonus for us. What do you know? or maybe extra war funds, whatever direction you want to go.
I think the draft picks themselves, on the like more positive side of things, I do like some character moments in this. Like this volume begins what I like to call the spin-off manga Wakamura Trigger. We all like to joke around that we don't know who the main character in this manga is, but in the end, we all know it's the one with the glasses. In all seriousness, like Wakamura is going to get a lot of focus from now on, and while I do not know where his arc is going, the manga is doing a good job at intriguing me, so...
Oh, you've turned what I thought would be an awkward bounce back to the previous topic into a pretty good segue. Because, yeah, I was thinking about this volume a lot in terms of how Ashihara presents the main character thing, and how he's like, oh yeah, the initial four, like the first three Tamakoma 2 figures and Jin are the main characters. But then this volume raises the idea of like Jin making the call to stay in Mikado City during the away mission, and I think there's a couple of possibilities that are likely there. One, in the years since making that comment Ashihara made, he has decided to maybe walk this back a little. Maybe, like, the story's developed in a way that he's just not found a fit for him. Maybe he, there's always a chance that Ashihara's more of a gardener than we give him credit for, and less of an architect, to get at that, to bang out that old George R.R. Martin analogy. Or two, he's taking a prominent role in defending against another vassal state's invasion at some point, which may happen concurrently with the away mission. We might see that. Or three, which ties back to my earlier point, Jin could just be lying. He only said that to the Galapolish. He might still be going on the away mission.
It's very interesting, like, suggesting that he's not going to be relevant in a good while. But some of, like, the plot beats he introduces, they definitely, like, make me 4D chess myself into a corner here. Especially since, like, I still don't know whether to treat whether Raijimaru is actually a Tsuchigami. Is she a crown trigger, or was that just a bluff?
I mean, she's definitely not a Tsuchigami, because I think the Tsuchigami were a particular type of crown trigger.
Okay, I read it more as a local name for the same thing.
That could also be what he was going for, yeah. A few notes on the final B-Rank Wars match. On my initial read, I think this felt a tad unnecessary, but in hindsight, the opening match leads into the away mission test remarkably well. You have stuff like Kotori and Suwa being pit against each other, and Kotori getting her last moment of, like, really shining as a solo attacker right before she's going to go under the captainage of Suwa. That's quite amusing, the contrast there. And then, of course, you get the Katori squad stuff where it illuminates a side to Wakamura that his last match only really gave us an inclination of. Like, we knew he didn't totally have it in that match against Tamakoma squad. Like, we knew he wasn't fully with it, but because he had Katori squad's flaws to contrast with, he seemed like relatively level-headed. But here we really see that he can just panic and make really bad calls, and that only becomes a recurring motif as the volume goes on with the draft picks.
This match also has some nice callbacks. Like Cityscape C was one of the earliest maps that Tamakoma chose.
Yes. Fighting Suwa Squad again.
And here we see what happens when the random warping completely doesn't work your way, because Akane is right there at the bottom, but still manages to make a good use out of that map with Narsa's help. I guess I didn't really understand why perhaps Suwa Squad didn't just move in on Akane instead of chasing after Narsa there. I guess they probably thought that it was their only chance to get some points on Narsa before she chases after them. Because they knew what Akane's location was, why didn't they just chase after her and get rid of her quickly? It usually works with snipers, so it was a little different here.
My gripe with this match is that Hyura's finisher was a tad underwhelming for me. Not bad, but just not quite as interesting as I'd like. I feel like when it's really cool is when you have planting and then in World Triggers, when you have some planting and then some payoff. Some very easy to understand aspect of how the winning tactic worked that makes sense with information that you already know. Whereas here, the planting is in the payoff. You only see how Hyura managed to finish off Tsutsumi. You only manage to see that as they're explaining how he does it, and there's no real way you could have conceptualized it. He's kind of that she go for a heart, so I focus my shield there. Whereas, before the shot went off, you don't really see that. In another shonen, if it was visualized more clearly, that would be fine. It's just not a very strong world trigger payoff to me.
I guess we kind of knew that the Tryon supply and Thingamabob are located in the heart or the head. I think it was shown in Chica's training. That's where usually snipers aim for. I could argue, does it really need a setup if we already had this information? But also, World Trigger provides a lot of information and then not a lot of reminders about it, so it's fair that it's not as enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm very much talking kind of immediate information within the battle.
I had a standout panel in this match. Katori slashing Nasu. It's just the poses, the bullets flying about, the expressions, everything looks so great in this sequence. I loved it. And I also like in that match how Ko is introduced in the commentary team as the number 4 attacker, while Narasaka isn't introduced as the number 2 sniper. It's the sniper rankings don't even matter. So sad.
Everyone only wants the flashy hand-to-hand people. That's all anyone cares about. The Chapter 197 is sadly one of those cases that unless the series gets a bungo release, we've always got an incomplete chapter in some way. Because obviously in the original chapter and the one that's up there on the Shonen Jump Vault, Ashihara was clearly really struggling and wasn't able to ink certain sections of it fully. Still very rough in a few pages. And then, obviously, in the, Tankoban, I've not actually read it, so I can't confirm this, but I assume that corrections are put in. But in default Tankobans, the color page has to be grayscaled because of the paper that they release it on. So yeah, and I don't know how likely that, a big bungo release, I don't know, maybe an omnibus or even just a limited edition, slightly expanded version is, but I think World Trigger's reach might just be a little too limited to make that sort of thing possible. So I guess it really depends. It's do you want to see this nice color page at the front, or do you want to have a more complete version of the chapter? Pick and choose. It's unfortunate.
It was weird. I kind of like the sketchy sequence. I'm so used to World Trigger being very on model. Here the proportions are very on model, but the line work is very rough, but at the same time it's gains a bit more character when the line work isn't exactly the same length in each place. It kind of becomes more expressive and the characters pop out more.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting, if unintentional, cross-section of how the manga is drawn. I would be interested, I guess it would be interesting to see a whole manga from the ground up with this sort of style. Not that I'm confident that Ashihara's gonna do another series after this. I feel like he's probably stuck with World Trigger and then gonna stop, like sort of like with Oda, like and One Piece.
Yeah, God, I hope he's set for life after this because, my God.
Yeah.
I thought Urishima's introduction, back to the draft picks, it always comes back to the draft picks.
But that's the thing, they're the big thing that set up the next arc that's very much on our minds, so of course we're going to dwell on it the most.
I thought Urishima's introduction there was very strong. Like, he says a few lines, and we immediately get what his character is all about, what he might have hidden back then. We set up the mystery of why does he have just his squad on its own? It's just him and his operator. Oh yeah, he is so focused on money. We know that the B rank pay is like commission based. So whenever you kill a Tryon soldier, you get appropriate pay for it. When it's just him, he like takes all the money along with Rokita.
Yeah, Urashima is a funny one because I think you go back and listen to the early episodes of this podcast. It's the first time we've seen this character. I don't know if we discussed this on the podcast or if this was just off recording, but it was like, oh, it's the first time we've seen this character. He's been off screen for so long. I wonder what role he's going to play in the next arc. And then I'm like, oh, I bet he's going to be a very like scheming and he's going to screw things up for Yuma or something. But no, in a very Ashihara move, this guy, he's just kind of another member of that cast of thousands. He's not done anything particularly notable off the bat. Not to say that he won't, but he is definitely not played into the arc in the way that I'd expected, because his introduction isn't meant to be a big deal.
He gets friendly with Yuma, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Speaking of Yuma, you don't say, it's saved to my phone as a reaction meme when he reacts like with a very blasé duckface expression to a Yotaro's reveal. The sequence where Cronin juggles Yotaro on its feet. Can you imagine, like, some people think this is a dry series? That, like, this is straight out of Real Yenthl.
One comedy bit I love in this volume is that I love Rata's little... It's not even a comedy, it's just a funny little thing. Rata's little calm yourself motion to Reigi when he gets really cagey towards Jin and Rendo. It's like, we're trying to be diplomatic here. Can you stop? It's just him holding out his hand while he's complaining. It's really good.
Reggie, you must chill. Yes, speaking of comedy, like, I love Hughes' Joy bike ride so much. It's a contender of like a standout comedic moment of the series, like, let alone this volume.
It's a really good panel. Just how kind of when he was introduced, you kind of expect Hughes to be this sort of edgy loner who just does his thing and is really cool all the time, and no, he's a dorky kid. He's just quite proficient in battle.
During the Akane's goodbye, I've noticed that Izuho has got an enamel pin with the evil kitty from Meftocrator. Are they? Is Border selling those now? I'm just wondering.
It's like that much maligned joke in Thor: Love and Thunder when New Asgard starts selling infinity cones.
Oh my god.
Which I've heard a funny counterpoint to, like, yeah, you know what? If 9/11, if half the people, if like all the people that died in 9/11 just miraculously came back, it would be a pretty funny thing to joke about.
Seeing an alliance with Galapola was an unexpected move from the narrative standpoint, but it makes sense, like, thematically, given what Tamakoma branch represents. Do you have much more thoughts on Orkan and so on?
I mean, it definitely kind of props up the idea that perhaps the last stretch of World Trigger might not necessarily be a big battle, but, like, it will be built more around diplomacy and perhaps Border coming to a peaceful resolution with Meftocrator, or at the very least kind of Tamakoma branch spearheading that to happen. It's definitely, I do want that tension of, obviously Kido probably doesn't want a Kumbaya ending. I want that tension to be resolved in an interesting way, or addressed in an interesting way, and I hope we get some cool action on the away mission, but I could definitely see, ultimately, that not be the final stretch of this, what the final stretch of the series is focused on.
Still kind of guessing about that. When it comes to the prince himself, the name was instantly interesting to me because, like, Orkan is I know it as the Polish word for whirlwind or a tornado or like a hurricane. In addition to that, I found out that it's a Turkish given name, and Marduk is the name of the patron deity of the city of Babylon. He was like a god of ancient Mesopotamia.
Cool.
Marduk is the god of creation, water, agriculture, justice, medicine, and magic.
Yeah. Up until this volume, I hadn't thought of Kanda's departure from Yuba Squad as being so recent to justify and now we're doing a leaving party at the local restaurant sort of event for them. But I guess it does add up with it being so fresh in Yuba Squad's memory during their match. I guess in my head I'd always conceptualized it as being a bit further away.
I guess it makes sense that they're like gradually dropping the ranks while being such a big deal early on. It's a cool narrative device this way.
Yeah, it allows them to present it as a big challenge in some ways, but also convincingly be a diminishing. I don't know where I was going with that point.
I can finish for you.
Do it!
It also establishes the way how like the squads are shuffling around. Establishes not only the drafts, but also the shuffling during what they talk about during the actual tests of why some squads like necessarily change over the years. During the draft picks, I like that. I like that when the teams are being assembled, they keep the Duckface heads in the corner of the panels. As much as the sequence was like tedious to you, you can kind of follow what's going on at least. As long as you know vaguely who these characters are, you are then able to keep up with the teams. You were saying about the mission stipend. How do you say that?
I say stipend, but that might be wrong. Stipend sounds right.
So the mission stipend is insane for Polish standards. It's more than a livable wage on its own, yet alone with like the base pay and commission rate of fucking 12-year-olds earning more than me in a week. Wow. Wensleydale forgot about the crown trigger.
No, I was asking you about this because I was making my summary and I was like, should I put? Wait, has it been established that the border has a god trigger? And then the chapter itself answered like, oh yeah, no they don't. I tend to make the summary in chronological order as I'm reading through it. So yeah.
Hughes casually chats with Osamu a lot more than before. It's the relationship that got a lot more friendly. Kakizaki is like very sweet, trying to cheer up Taichi after being picked dead last. That's very cute. I know that they didn't specify why, but god, the fact that there are just no female captains this is just a sausage fest. We know later that oh yeah, this is how we are like establishing future border administration. It's just going to be, it's kind of a mirror of Shonen Jump's Boy Club.
Yeah, and also I think the fact that Katagiri the only one. Or is it Kako is as well, isn't she?
Kako is a female captain, and Katagiri is the female captain who is also the operator of her squad.
I was going to say she's the only one sans one, and she is also an operator. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not that an operator captain isn't a cool idea.
Oh, it's very cool. When I found out, I was like, oh yeah, I'm completely on board with that.
Yeah, and also covering this volume finally breaks the tension on. Oh, I can just do birthday tweets for every character that I've missed now. Because I don't think a single character, one, has been introduced since then, and two, if they have, they sure as hell don't have a birthday yet. So, I'm free. The weights have been dropped.
There's my last note, which is operator-related, mind you. So, apparently Ruka operates them, Mother Trigger, whatever that would entail. But why I found that particularly interesting was that she was an operator in Talented Elite Gym. You know, that shit one-shot that Ashihara wrote before this.
And if you want to hear more about why Wensleydale finds it shit, you can go to our Patreon.
Patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar. Go right ahead.
It would be a really interesting twist if, like, they get to the heart of the away mission, they're attempting diplomacy, and, like, Kido is like, no, cease this at once. We're going to blow after Krator to smithereens. We are launching a targeted assault now. It has to happen. And then Shinoda just turns around and he's like, Ruka can just turn off our Treon at the drop of a hat. She'll leave us completely vulnerable. You won't be able to do anything. And, like, they turn the fact that she can control this against Kido and force his hand and be like, okay, fine, I'll go along with what you want. Or something like that. That would be funny and quite cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting how that works specifically. So I guess we'll see someday, maybe.
Maybe someday. I don't know. I feel like it feels like kind of like my experience with reading One Punch Man. It feels like Ashihara has fit into his own snug, irregular regularity with his releases. I don't get this. I get the sense that the current schedule is working for him. Hopefully, the series will continue to run its course smoothly.
So speaking of schedules, do you want to talk about the future of this podcast more?
Let's do it.
It's a theme to the future. It's last chance of hearing it here on this podcast, but because like we're probably not gonna like do a spoiler corner again, but because why the fuck should we?
Obviously, I think for you it's more up in the air if we continue this. I think for me, like, if we continue to do this, I think changes will have to happen. The summary section is going to have to be much more brief. Like, I feel like we're just going to skim over what happens in the volume in like a paragraph or a paragraph each, and then delve into it. Because if you're this far, you've read the manga.
Perhaps I should like start from the beginning. A while ago, I've figured out that while I thought before that I could do several projects at once, I think I've come to a point in my life where I can barely do one project on the side with a full-time job, yet alone like 2 or 3. I would like to continue Duckface Diaries, and I would like to continue it until basically World Trigger runs out, until we reach the end of the series. I would like to recap it chapter by chapter eventually. I don't think I can concentrate on running this podcast and editing the audio throughout the next year. I guess the ball's kind of in the air, and I was going to basically ask you, which I kind of did before, if the schedule changed to we release whenever we want to, rather than a strict release month after month, would you be willing to edit the podcast next year?
Audio, yes. Visuals, I've actually done the visual component for a podcast before. It's very much left my brain now. So if you were able to do like the visual assets and the video version, and then just send it back to me and I could distribute it, I could see myself being able to do that.
That actually works for me perfectly. Obviously, like, you don't have to, and I do want to be like transparent about it, and this is why we're having like this conversation here on the podcast, because I know that I can have a tendency to yes, I will announce this, and then I won't explain myself properly in text, and I will even start misunderstanding myself. So how can I trust like listeners to understand what I'm trying to communicate? Obviously, you said that you wouldn't be able to start immediately next year, and I am completely fine with that. I think we've reached a big milestone, and we deserve to have a bit of hiatus.
Yeah, it's really going to be a case of when will my itch to... I have a similar thing. I really want to see, especially the read-through portion when we go through the volumes, I want to see that run its course and to get absolutely caught up. Chapter by chapter is going to be a whole new ball game. That'll be that I'd have to try it in order to know how long I would stick with that. And I feel like it's just when that itch to finish this project becomes strong enough versus just having other stuff on my plate. And I feel like it won't be too long. But, you know, that's my promise, not Wensleydale's, so blame me if it's bloody ages.
At the same time, I think doing this chapter by chapter is going to be much different, and I think like we should approach it carefully. So this is why I'm thinking that no matter what the manga's release is going to turn out to be, I think we should finish covering this arc, the away mission test at least, volume by volume anyway. We've managed to like start a second podcast, Pokemon Adventures. If you haven't yet tried listening to it, we're covering like the Pokemon Adventures manga arc by arc. With this, we'd have way more opportunities to focus on that, even if we wouldn't obviously be able to continue like releasing this month after month either. This portion of the manga won't like lend itself well to be recapped chapter by chapter anyway, because like it's for how like interesting I can find it, just doesn't really generate this much excitement. I don't think we'd be able to like properly build hype to it if we just caught up and then started to discuss like each chapter where how's Ikoma going to try to impress the girls now.
Yeah, I feel like for each individual chapter I would have about 5 minutes worth of stuff to say and then I'd be done. That makes a lot of sense.
And I think when we reach that point, it may turn out that our episodes are going to be like way shorter. I'm fine with that. It's not a secret that we are not like a successful by like YouTube's or Spotify's or any standard. We're just doing this because we have fun, and I am very grateful for the support I've received from you for so many years, especially like the people who for some reason decided to support me on Patreon. Thank you. This was incredible. And of course I like won't blame you if you decide to pause it until we get a regular release again. But at the same time, we won't stop working on it. Part of the reason why I do want to take a break is because I have another project. The said project is also like part of what I work on the channel for. I've set on like my highest tier of my Patreon early access to a project I've worked the longest for, which is an animated series that I've been trying to work on for a decade now, with many ups and downs, with like many breakdowns. I would like to finish this before I die, so this is also the reason why I do want to take a break for some time at least. At the same time, while recapping this volume, I've gotten like very enthusiastic for it, so I'd be happy to record the next Duckface Diaries even tomorrow, if like we had the opportunity. But at the same time, I know that I won't have the time to edit it because like my life has just become that different, and I was able to keep up with this for this year. I think I've run out of energy for that by now.
Yeah, I hadn't really kind of seriously considered the idea of just like holding off on doing chapter to chapters until like a more active point in the story, but like it makes a lot of sense, I think, when I really think it through, and I'm quite happy with that.
All right, so I guess that's settled then. I guess we're going to be trying to release next is the next Podcast Mon Adventures, which is the Yellow arc. Is that right?
Yes. And we'll get to recording that as soon as is feasible.
Yeah, for all of us. We'll try to figure it out with Henry. We'll try to figure out if another guest wants to come on. That's, I think, all for now. So unless you think there's something else to discuss, shall we do the round off?
Let's do it.
So, that is going to do it for the 23rd episode of Duckface Diaries. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. Just finishing on a strong note, aren't you, Wensleydale? Okay, you can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for Duckface Diaries and we'll be there. Links to all the platforms are at patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar. Everything is in the pin post. That is also what helps me pay the bills. That is what is going to help Hovin pay for his Switch games. I don't know.
For the Switch games and all the anime and manga that I talk about on here. And D&D.
We all spend so much of your money on D&D. Let's not say that.
Yeah, like I might buy a new dice set once every 4 years.
We will
for the
buy
one time a year I play in person.
We will buy the rights to the Wizards of the Coast.
Alright guys, we are single-handedly funding seasons like 4 and 5 of Critical Role. of Legends of the Vox Machina.
So, if you want us to devote more time to making the show better, consider supporting us there. In return, you can get your name in the YouTube credits, or a World Trigger Duckface avatar. Plus, you can help us reach more ambitious goals, like doing a special podcast to cover the anime filler arc, or covering the rest of Border Briefing File. Remember that much like the neighborhood, the YouTube Remember that much like the YouTube
Remember, much like the NudeTube algorithm.
Remember that much like the neighborhood, the YouTube algorithm is a dark abyss of sorrows and woes from which channels like these never resurface, and what helps us navigate it is liking, subscribing, and sharing the podcast with a friend. On the YouTube channel and the same RSS feed, you get access to not only Duckface Diaries, but Manga Mosaic, a collection of podcasts and video essays on other manga titles, short and long alike. On the same channel and anchor.fm/podcastmonadventures, you can listen to Podcast Mon Adventures, surprisingly. Ooh. Our new retrospective where we cover the Pokemon special manga arc by arc, along with the host of the Pink Isle Pod, Henry Kathman. Hovin, where can people find you?
You can find me at Hovin with an H on Twitter while it's still around, although it seems to be having the longest death of all time, according to everyone on it. It's like Tolkien wrote it or something. You can also find me on Hive at Hovin with an H. I have an avatar of Red Guy from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, so you'll know that it's the right one. I might not by the time. I might not even ever post there. I don't know. Some people seem a bit dodgy about Hive. It's a very turbulent time, but for the time being, as of recording, I'm posting on Twitter, so follow me there.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what to shout out at this point. I guess I guess follow my Twitter for the time being. I guess that's at Wednesday Cheddar, at Hoven with an H. There's at Duckface Diaries is the podcast account.
We can have Android hindsight, like, insert whatever current social media we have, if any, if it does miraculously change over the next week.
I don't know. Since we're planning on going on hiatus, I guess maybe it's the best fucking thing that we're gonna just you know what? Just become our patron and then message us there. That's probably the best fucking way to contact us, even if we are going on hiatus. All right, you can find all the links to every guest who's appeared on the show, to all HOVIN'S stuff, my stuff on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar in the pinned post. Send us emails, questions, comments, suggestions at Wensleydale012@gmail.com, and we'll answer those at the end of the next podcast, whenever that might be. A sincere thank you to Milo Jack Stillitz for composing music for us, an orchestral rendition of Giri Giri, the first opening sequence for World Trigger, and an orchestral rendition of Ashita no Hikari, the second opening sequence for the show in question. You can find his work at soundcloud.com/Milo-Jack-Stillitz-/bash. What are we covering? What are we covering next time, Ivan?
Yeah. Well, next time we would be covering Volume 24, which covers chapters 206 to 213. So whenever we post an announcement that that's coming out, you know what to read.
And look, like, Ashihara took a long hiatus, so we can do that too. It's very on brand. All right, so thank you, Hoven, for being on the show with me for like 23 volumes, plus all the border briefing file stuff, plus all the extra stuff. This was a ride, and like, this is a big milestone.
It's something you put to me, and it's never something I would have... It's never a podcast that I would have made on my own initiative. It's never something I thought to have done. It's been really good fun. It's given me so much newfound appreciation for a series that, like, was just kind of there for me beforehand.
Yeah, and very topically, it also started from like a Twitter thread. I just posted, I kind of like to do a retrospective on the series, and you were like, yeah, okay, let's do it, and that we did.
Might be lost media in the future. And you know what? Live on recording, just to crown this, gonna dethrone My Hero Academia. So on Annie List, I've got My Hero Academia as one of my faves on Manga. Gonna dethrone it. I'm gonna put World Trigger there instead, because My Hero Academia done a bad thing about social commentary, me no like.
Oh my god, but this is My Hero Academia. This is manga news and more.
Manga news and more, my god. So yeah, and because I need to have 12 series as my favorites, because otherwise it doesn't become a perfect square, because the way that AniList organizes it is that your favorites are displayed as like a little set of thumbnails, and now it makes a nice square shape again.
Oh my god, it's because you have to assign those to each sign in the zodiac. I thought it was going to be like this.
Oh no, you can do more. It's just if I added only one more, then it wouldn't be a square anymore. So I'm keeping it to 12, and to be honest, 12 is close enough to the kind of selection of manga where I think favorite.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. But in any case, we are a World Trigger podcast, and this was the 23rd episode of that podcast, Duckface Diaries. Very concise, as we promised, and as always, it's time to
Bugger off!